Welcome to the Operation Smooth podcast. Tonight's episode is titled, as you can see, WrestleMania III, My Story. So we're going to go back in time to March the 29th, 1987. And I can assure you, 1987, it was a different world. That's for sure. March the 29th, 1987 was the day that really, for anybody that's a pro wrestling fan out there, it was the day that pro wrestling basically went into another stratosphere, another category. WrestleMania 3 was held in Detroit, Michigan at the old Pontiac Silverdome. Allegedly, there was 93,000 people at that event. It has already kind of been uh, debunked that there were 93,000 people there. There were less than 93,000 people there. But uh, regardless, still a historic event. In the main event, Andre the Giant challenged Hulk Hogan for the then World Wrestling Federation title. And for someone like me, who at the time was 11 years old, man, there was nothing like it, man. I mean, let me just uh, give context to versus 2026. In 1987, you didn't have internet. In 1987, uh, you didn't have pay-per-view or anything like that. In 1987, let's say, for example, you take this event, WrestleMania 3. If you wanted to find out who won, internet, you basically let's just say, I believe the Saturday show was a wrestling challenge, and I think the Sunday show back then was Superstars of Wrestling, or I could have it backwards. Back then, if you want to know who won the matches, you didn't have Peacock, you didn't have you didn't have Amazon Prime, you didn't have Paramount, you didn't have live streaming. So what you had to do was you had to wait until the following weekend to find out who won the matches, unless you knew somebody that went to one of the closed circuit events that they had back then. And this is basically from in the 80s up until around 1989, 1990. That's when actually when pay-per-view kind of changed, and you could pay whatever was 49.99 or 69.99 or whatever the case it was in order to watch whether it was wrestling, WWF, or NWA, which was National Wrestling Alliance, or as 91, 92, 93 kicked in. That's when you had pay-per-view boxing. For a lot of years, you could watch championship boxing fights for free, and then eventually those faded away, and you started watching those fights on pay-per-view. Now, this is really where my story kicks in. Um, in 1987, specifically March of 1987, I lived in a wonderful city that I have a lot of fond memories of. Pawtucket, Rhode Island, great place. I haven't been there in almost 40 years. I'm sure it's a lot different now, but again, it was a wonderful year and a half that I lived there. For added context to this story, there's some college basketball mixed into this WrestleMania 3 story. Um, Pawtucket is a city in Rhode Island. For those of you that love geography, obviously Providence is the capital of Rhode Island. In 1987, the 86-87 college basketball season, the Providence Friars, man, they had it going on. They had a head coach that you might have heard of over the years, a man by the name of Rick Pitino. He was the coach of Providence College in 86, 87. It was his second season. They had a point guard who you probably have heard of as well. His name was Billy Donovan. who ended up coaching the Florida Gators later to back-to-back national titles in 1986, 87, excuse me, 2006, 2007. And good comment. Um, So basically, that was the team that put Rick Pitino on the map. They had a roster of Billy Donovan, and they had Pop Lewis. They had Marty Conlon, who also ended up in the NBA. They would go on to the Final Four. They lost to Syracuse in the national semifinal. Syracuse had Ronnie Cycli, Sherman Douglas, Derek Coleman, and Syracuse would end up losing to Indiana in the national title game. Keith Smart hitting the game-winning shot with about 5 seconds left. So at that time, you had Providence moving up in the rankings, and then you had the build-up to WrestleMania 3. In a prior video that I made, I basically said that the build-up for this year's WrestleMania doesn't seem to quite hit the way the build-up to prior WrestleManias have been. You go back to WrestleMania 17 and the build-up to The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin and Undertaker versus Triple H and uh, Chris Benoit versus Kurt Angle and the TLC match between Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys and the Hardy Boys. The build-up to WrestleMania 3 was incredible. You go back to WrestleMania 1, it was more about the main event, which was Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. In the second WrestleMania, they had matches in New York, Chicago, and LA. The main event was Hulk Hogan against King Kong Bundy. The build-up to that WrestleMania was kind of around that match. For the third WrestleMania, the big build-up was obviously Andre the Giant allegedly being undefeated for 15 years, turning on his best friend Hulk Hogan, aligning himself with the evil Bobby the Brain Heenan to challenge Hulk Hogan at the height of Hulkamania. But that was not the only match that really had a good build-up. You had a really good build-up for the Intercontinental title match between Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Macho Man Randy Savage, a match that is considered by many the greatest WrestleMania match of all time, a match that's considered one of the all-time great matches in the history of pro wrestling. The build-up to that match was fantastic. They had a match in late 1986 where basically Randy Savage crushed Steamboat's throat, tried to put him out of wrestling, and then the build up to the comeback by Ricky Steamboat leading up to WrestleMania 3. There was a match on the January 1987 edition of Saturday Night's Main Event in which George the Animal Steel, who was part of that storyline, he kidnaps Elizabeth, takes her to the dressing room. Randy Savage is looking for her. He's about to chase after her, and there's the Ricky Steamboat's music hits. Steamboat comes out. I mean, man, it was good stuff, especially for an 11-year-old. There was nothing like it. You also had a pretty good build up for the Roddy Piper versus Adrian Adonis match. Uh, for those of you old enough to remember, Roddy Piper, one of the great heels of all time, he had a show called Piper's Pit. Adrian Adonis had a show called The Flower Shop. Basically, those were segments where they would bring other wrestlers there to have interviews and so on and so forth. So they had a thing going, and there was a match. I think it was Roddy Piper against the Iron Sheik, and at that time, Roddy Piper had a fake knee injury, so he's on crutches. He ends up winning the match against the Iron Sheik anyway. Adrian Adonis somehow gets in the match. Roddy Piper hits him with the crutches on the arm and shatters his elbow from a storyline standpoint. So that was a storyline that was had a great build up. You had a pretty good storyline between King Harley Race and the Junkyard Dog. And if the Junkyard Dog were to lose the match at WrestleMania, he would have to bow down to King Harley Race. You had another build up, a good build up between Billy Jack Haynes and the Mighty Hercules. That match was billed as the Battle of the Full Nelson. So overall, the build up for WrestleMania 3, it wasn't, yes, the main thing was Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. but you had other storylines that they were building up along the way. One of the other matches was the Can-Am Connection, Rick Martel and the late Tom Zink. They were going to go up against Bob Orton and the Magnificent Morocco. That was the first match on the card. The Can-Am Connection was a babyface team that were starting to get built up. They were starting to get momentum. But due to backstage issues, and I guess there was issues between Tom Zink and Rick Martel, the team never really achieved their potential. Another match that had a good build-up was the Honky Tonk Man against Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake the Snake Roberts had by that point become a babyface. He had his own show called The Snake Pit, and in the build up to that match, the Honky Tonk Man hit him with upside the head with the guitar. Come to find out, it was a real guitar that the Honky Tonk Man hit him with, and Jake the Snake Roberts in that match, being outnumbered 2-1, he had one of the greatest rock stars of all time, Alice Cooper, in his corner. So there was a blend of professional wrestling and mainstream America. You had Bob Uecker as the co-host of WrestleMania III, along with Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse the Body Ventura. For those of you old enough to remember, what a great commentating team that was as well. So, like I said, I remember just being so hyped up as an 11-year-old for WrestleMania 3. And I remember everybody at school as a sixth grader, all my sixth grade classmates, that's all we were talking about, man. Oh man, what's gonna happen? You know, is Andre gonna be Hogan? So on and so forth. What's gonna happen with Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage? What's gonna happen? Is Piper gonna retire? That was part of the Roddy Piper storyline. Roddy Piper was about to retire from professional wrestling. So that was going to be his last match, win or lose. But let's just go through the entire card and the match results and how long the matches lasted. In the first match, like I said, the Can-Am Connection of Rick Martel and Tom Zink. They beat Bob Orton and the Magnificent Morocco 5.5 minutes. Billy Jack Haynes and Hercules, that match ended in a double countout. That match lasted about 7.5 minutes. uh, Hillbilly Jim and a couple of the midget wrestlers, the Haiti Kid and Little Beaver, they beat King Kong Bundy and his tag team partners, who were midget wrestlers, Little Tokyo and Lord Littlebrook. That was a disqualification. In that match, King Kong Bundy, all 450 pounds, he basically did a splash on Little Beaver for the disqualification. And then the loser must bow match, Harley Race uh, with Bobby Heenan and the Fabulous Moolah. He beat the Junkyard Dog. So the Junkyard Dog had to bow down to King Harley Race. He did that, then basically beat his ass and stole his crown and his little outfit. In a tag match, the Dream Team of Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake, they beat the Rougeau brothers. That's a match probably nobody remembers. Roddy Piper defeated Adrian Adonis. He put him in a sleeper hold. And I think in that match, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, who ended up becoming a baby face after the Greg Valentine tag match, I think Adrian Adonis came in there and, excuse me, Brutus the Barber Beefcake went into the ring and they basically, him and Roddy Piper basically shaved Adrian Adonis's head. I don't remember the dynamics of that storyline. Then Dangerous Danny Davis, the former crooked referee, and the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, they beat Tito Santana and the British Bulldogs. If I remember correctly, Danny Davis hit Davey Boy Smith with Jimmy Hart's megaphone. That's how they won that match. The Natural Butch Reed defeated Coco Beware. And at the end of that match, Tito Santana went in there, beat up Slick, and basically stripped him of all his clothing and sent Slick on his way. And then afterward, you had, like I stated before, one of the greatest matches ever. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat defeated Randy Macho Man Savage for the Intercontinental title. George the Animal Steel was in Ricky Steamboat's corner. Miss Elizabeth, the late great Miss Elizabeth, in Randy Savage's corner. If you have a chance, I'm sure WrestleMania 3, the whole event is on Peacock, but you can get on YouTube. You can watch that Ricky Steamboat Randy Savage match. I don't care what era of wrestling you're in, or that's one of those matches that you can show somebody that doesn't even like professional wrestling, hey, watch this match, and I can assure you that whoever watches that doesn't like wrestling, they might see wrestling from a whole different perspective. Yes, the results are predetermined and all that, but the athleticism and a lot of the blows that they take, those are not fake. And if you don't believe me, look at these wrestlers from 40 years ago, the ones that are still living, and you look at the state of their health. A lot of them can't even walk because of all the blows that they've taken over the years. After that great match, the Honky Tonk Man ended up beating Jake the Snake Roberts, and then the second to last match was the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. They defeated the Killer Bees, jumping Jim Brunzell and beat Brian Blair by disqualification. And then, of course, you had the main event of all main events, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Uh, Obviously, didn't get to see it live. Didn't find out basically till the next week what had happened. So Hulk Hogan did retain the championship. I ended up seeing the match years later. I can just imagine what it must have been like at the Pontiac Silverdome for that match, Hulk Hogan against Andre the Giant. I've seen the match a few times over the years. Definitely does not compare from a technical standpoint to Ricky Steamboat versus Randy Savage, but just both matches, the excitement, the exhilaration, the anticipation. The moment before the match where Hulk Hogan is standing face to face with Andre the Giant, and just the way they built it up. Andre the Giant, way past his prime at that point, um, suffering from a lot of health issues. So they did the best with what they could under those circumstances. But towards the end, Hogan takes Andre the Giant down. Andre the Giant gets back up, and then the body slam heard around the world. Hogan slams Andre the Giant, comes off the ropes, hits the leg drop, gets the 1, 2, 3, retains the title. And if we're being honest, WrestleMania 3 is the WrestleMania that cemented that WrestleMania was going to be a permanent staple in American sports entertainment culture. There have been some great matches in WrestleManias since then. You had in WrestleMania 6, Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior. WrestleMania 5, Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage. You go back years later, WrestleMania 17, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. A couple of years ago, you had a classic between Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. Um, you had a WrestleMania 23. You had a real good match between John Cena and Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, ended up being Mr. WrestleMania in WrestleManias 25 and 26. Two epic matches against The Undertaker, but all none of that happens if it wasn't for WrestleMania 3. Uh, this was the match that really just put professional wrestling, not just the WWE, it put professional wrestling and really made it mainstream. Up until then, wrestling was very territorial. WWE was in the Northeast. You had the NWA, which was more in the Charlotte, Atlanta area. You had the AWA, more in the Minneapolis, Chicago area. World Class Championship Wrestling, which was in the Dallas, Texas area. But this was the moment where the WWE basically took over, and it's taken over ever since. So you got to give up props to Vince McMahon for his vision. Uh, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Roddy Piper, Macho Man Randy Savage, and many others helped to contribute to professional wrestling, or sports entertainment as it's called now, uh, to being what it is today. But the most important day, probably of them all, today. March the 29th, 1987. It's hard to believe it's been 39 years and so many things that I remember like it was yesterday. The anticipation of WrestleMania 3, the months and months of buildup, not just of the Hulk Hogan storyline, but like I stated earlier, the Adrian Adonis Piper storyline, the Ricky Steamboat, Randy Macho Man Savage storyline. I think that's what really made it successful. They built up a lot of the storylines at the same time, and then of course you had the main one. Whereas there's been some WrestleManias where, yeah, they built up the main event, but the rest of the card was kind of like meh. I think that's the problem with this year's WrestleMania. They're doing a good build up with CM Punk versus Roman Reigns. They're doing a good job with Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton. But the rest of the matches there, it's just kind of like, whatever. Whereas again, WrestleMania 3, you had a lot of matches that had a great build up and a great memory for me. And again, these young kids out here, they've got it so good. You've got Peacock, Amazon Prime, I know Hulu, so many other streaming services where you can watch pay-per-views live. Now, I think boxing you can get on DAZN and watch pay-per-views. Now UFC doesn't have to do pay-per-views anymore. They have their agreement with Paramount. So all you gotta do is pay what, 12, 10, 12, $15 a month, and you can watch those great events. Um, but WrestleMania 3, March the 29th, 1987. Those are my thoughts. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to hear comments, especially for you wrestling fans that remember WrestleMania 3. Feel free to get in the comments. Tell me your WrestleMania 3 story. This is the Operation Smooth podcast.